I've never seen Avatar the Last Airbender, which is pretty insane to say considering I spent my entire childhood on the Nickelodeon channel. Even though I basically watched everything else that aired on Nickelodeon, Avatar never really caught my attention since I never properly started it in the first place. I remember watching a few episodes of The Legend of Korra when it began airing, but I remember nothing about that show apart from taking immaculate naps while it was playing on in the background. But I was a stupid kid back then, and I didn't really know how to properly appreciate media. Now, I'm a stupid adult who's even more clueless than I was back then, so I decided now's the perfect time to hop into Avatar. I was initially gonna watch the animated series, but after hearing every single one of my friends bitch and moan about the live action Avatar and how it supposedly massacred some of their favorite characters, I knew I had to start with the live action first. So as someone who has no Avatar knowledge prior to watching Netflix Avatar, how did the live action hold up? Is it actually a great introduction to Avatar for a moron like me? Well, it was something alright. Also, there won't be many concrete spoilers in this review, although you probably know more about Avatar than I do if you're here. The world of Avatar is truly wondrous. I haven't watched animated Avatar, but I know that a lot of the time, live action settings can fall flat due to lacking the spectacle that's seen in animation. This tends to happen more in fantasy settings where crazy architecture is present everywhere, and sometimes it's impossible to translate those kinds of unique locations into live action. But with Avatar's live action, the production nailed every unique location I came across, from the fiery capital of the world's hungriest conquistador to the ancestral site Nagnakella. Each location in Netflix Avatar has had a lot of thought put into its visuals, which I notice is a trend with Netflix live action adaptations, as we can see with One Piece as well. These budgets have led to some seriously stunning stuff. This is all surface level when it comes to world building. You can have really cool locations visually, but will they have any weight without lore and a unique identity? In Avatar's case, yes, and it's apparent after the first episode that even more thought was put into writing Avatar's world, which is fundamentally different from ours due to the concept of bending. Though having magical abilities using natural elements isn't exactly the freshest idea, Avatar brilliantly takes the concept of bending and uses it to establish the identity of the world. There's 4 separate nations belonging to 4 separate elements: earth, wind, fire, and September. Wait, no, water. These nations all have their own cultures and ideologies that directly reflect the element they use, and all of them are united through the Avatar, which cycles through nations with each reincarnation. The Fire Nation, for example, believes in conquering and expanding like fire itself, whereas the Water Nation prides themselves on their adaptability, which is akin to water. There's also the Spirit World that holds spirits for primal forces of nature, amongst other things, but I don't really know much about it at the moment, and I assume it'll get more fleshed out later on. I just love the concept of spirits themselves being the literal embodiment of things like the moon, and if they get killed, whatever they're tied to goes bye-bye. Beyond that, each nation uses their bending not only for combat, but for basically everything. I got to see the marvels of earthbending by seeing all the complex systems in the city of Omashu, where I found that earthbenders are able to create unbelievable structures without seams. Details like this are important for making the world feel alive, and Avatar did an amazing job in this aspect. Even though I didn't spend an incredible amount of time at all of these different locations, I was still impacted by each one of them due to the great spectacle and lore that was provided for them. I didn't need to know the origin behind the tragic creation of Omashu, but Avatar still gave me this information through the lips of a bunch of stoners in a cave. Wait, these guys are literally just the Grateful Dead. The nations themselves aren't in complete unity either, mainly because one Fire Lord said, "Hey, you see all of this peace, all of this prosperity and happiness? I don't like it. Let's do an Order 66 on the Airbenders. Fire Nation number 1, baby." I was really glad that Avatar wasn't taking the concept of war lightly, and all the inner strife going on within the Fire Nation was shown pretty frequently. In terms of action, it was done better than I had expected from a live action show. Bending consistently looked fantastic, and stuff like Katara bending water to make something like a whip looked great. Choreography also was decent in combining bending with martial arts, and I was able to see a decent amount of really cool fights, my favorites being those involving Zuko. That boy almost landed a clean hit on the big Ozai, and only got his eye burnt off because he held back. He's special. Though it seems like other nations are gonna be doomed due to the Fire Nation, the Fire Nation itself is engulfed in its own inner battles, mainly the one for succession between Zuko and Azula, which gives me a pretty good transition into talking about the characters of Netflix Avatar. They're pretty great. At least the foundations of the characters introduced are done really well. The main character, Aang, has been trapped in ice for 100 years and wakes up to find out that his entire people has gotten massacred. On top of that, Aang is the Avatar, the person in charge of keeping harmony and peace amongst the 4 nations. Yet he's disappeared for a century. For any regular person whose home was ravaged by the Fire Nation, it would make sense to blame Aang for abandoning his duty when the world needed him the most, and that's exactly what happens to Aang whenever people find out about his status. This effectively sets up a very interesting character arc for Aang where he needs to learn how to accept the weight of his responsibilities, stop blaming himself entirely for the past, and balance the necessary solitude that comes with being the Avatar with meaningful relationships of his own. His companions, Sokka and Katara, also have character arcs of their own, like Katara's quest to become a better waterbender, and Sokka becoming his own man and not being afraid of disappointing others due to his own lack of ability. From the Fire Nation side, the first season was mainly focusing on Zuko and Uncle Iroh, who were honestly the best parts of the show by far. It was really cool seeing how much Zuko and Aang had in common when it comes to growing up really quickly and having tremendous responsibility placed on them, just for them to be enemies that could hopefully understand each other one day. I found Zuko to be the most interesting Avatar character by far, especially in tandem with Uncle Iroh, who tries to play it cute, but like, isn't this dude an actual war criminal? Anyways, T is good. Iroh doesn't really get away scot-free either. Someone found out he was the famed Dragon of the West and beat his ass for his war crimes. It really hammers home the amount of destruction the Fire Nation had caused and how everyone in the world was affected by it, whether it's Aang or some random cabbage seller in the middle of Omashu. Everyone has seen war, and them blaming Aang for not saving them and also hating the Fire Nation in general makes complete sense. I hope I get to see more about what the Fire Nation was doing for the past 100 years, like Ba Sing Se. I don't know what it is, but something called Ba Sing Se can't be mid. Iroh trying to guide Zuko onto the path of a leader is also being handled pretty well, and Zuko's arrogant and by the books mentality changes heavily as he gets screwed over, mostly by his own people. His dynamic with Fire Lord Ozai is also pretty interesting. I expected Ozai to be some demonic tyrant, but after seeing him send away his own son for showing compassion, I'm insanely curious about his past. The foundation for these characters may be excellent, but real problems start to arise when we get to the actual development of these characters within the show. Most of these issues stem from the problematic pacing. Even as someone who has never watched the original animated Avatar, I can still tell that some things have either been cut out or simply been adapted in a really odd manner. The rushed pacing really negatively affects the adventurous feel of Avatar. I know the show is supposed to feel like Aang and his homies traveling through this expansive world and going on different adventures that build up characters that reside within the region along with the main characters themselves, but the live action kinda completely fumbles this aspect. In Omashu, we meet a king named Bumi, who was homies with Aang before Aang unlocked his popsicle avatar state. Too bad we see 5 seconds of them interacting when they were young before Bumi tries to square up with Aang, a literal child. The whole episode just felt like some old ass man squabbling with a kindergartner, and the message Bumi was trying to show about shouldering burdens didn't even hit. He straight up sucked. In Omashu, I was introduced to Jet, who I thought was going to be a chill-ass Spike Spiegel kind of character, but nope, he's a straight-up terrorist. I spent so little time with him and his group that I didn't even care about their mission and ideology. Even the time Aang spends with the past avatars feels rushed apart from what he had with Kyoshi. When Aang said he was going to go to the Fire Nation so he can save his friends, I thought we'd be embarking on an epic journey that needs careful planning since Aang would be walking into the enemy's den. But no, Aang finds Roku's temple, some random dude starts fighting all the other sages at Roku's shrine, and before I knew it, Aang was going back to his friends. He just met the fire avatar and you're telling me that's all he can offer? His words don't even hold much weight even though he's an avatar. It shouldn't be like this. I also felt the same way with Kuruk. A lot of these character interactions and moments that should feel like a huge payoff end up falling flat, and it really hindered my viewing experience. Non-main characters getting this kind of treatment, I can sort of understand, but it even branches out to the main cast. Katara's whole struggle with waterbending in general doesn't matter. She just locks in whenever she has to and she immediately figures things out. Even when she was against a waterbending master in Paku, she made him sweat off rip. Like damn, it feels like Katara despairs for 10 seconds before somehow learning hard waterbending techniques that a lot of people don't even know about. She even managed to convince Paku to let the women fight, which is great and all, but we've spent so little time here that I don't even give a shit. This moment, which probably should have been an epic stand to break tradition, just ended up feeling super lame. There's also Sokka, somehow making every girl he comes across fall in love with him in 10 seconds. Bro, I don't even know this character's name. How are you already making out with her? Lucky bastard. Development aside, there's characters that just kinda suck in general, and it feels like they shouldn't. Azula, okay? I'm talking about Azula. She is definitely a character. She's gassed up as this cunning genius that knows whose strings to pull for the results she desires, but in action, she's just kind of a whiny, bitchy child that has daddy issues. It's not even done well like it is in Zuko's case either. It genuinely feels like Azula is this massive baby who has yes women following her around while she constantly rambles about being on the throne, even though we all damn know well she ain't her. There's also other dumb stuff like the Fire Nation fumbling the most important person on the planet and allowing him to escape twice, and some dialogue in general is just really jarring. Like a character would be portraying an emotion through their acting, and then another character would just say what was supposed to be subtle out loud. It's like if I smiled at a picture of a cheesesteak and a hobo pulled up next to me and announced to everyone, hey, this guy, he really loves cheesesteaks. It's not even an Avatar specific issue, but I just don't like stuff like this in general. I do love cheesesteaks though. Despite all my criticisms, Netflix Avatar still did what it intended to do. It got me interested in Avatar. Even if this wasn't the perfect experience, I'm still really curious to see how Aang's story unfolds. At the minimum, I'll start from where the live action leads off in the animated show, but given my character grievances, I might as well start from the beginning. At the end of the day, as a brand new Avatar watcher, I genuinely recommend Netflix Avatar. It brings Avatar to life, and I can understand why it's already been greenlit for a second and third season. Maybe Azula won't suck by then.